I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw Damon standing on my doorstep after all these years. My prodigal son, who had stormed out of my life a decade ago, was back, and he wasn't alone. A young woman clung to his arm, her sharp eyes scanning my modest home with thinly veiled disdain. "Mom," Damon said, his voice devoid of warmth. "This is Elsie, my wife." Before I could respond, he barreled on. "I've hit a rough patch, lost my job, my house, everything. We need a place to stay, just for a little while." My heart sank. The last time I'd seen Damon, we'd had a bitter argument over his reckless choices. He blamed me for his troubles and stormed out, vowing never to return. Now, here he was, seeking refuge under my roof once more. Hesitantly, I stepped aside to let them in. Elsie wrinkled her nose at the modest furnishings, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her designer handbag. "It's not much, but it's home," I offered, my voice strained. Damon shrugged, already making himself comfortable on my worn sofa. "It'll have to do for now." As I showed them to the spare room, I couldn't shake the feeling that their arrival signaled the start of a new storm brewing on the horizon. Over the next few days, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Damon criticized my frugal lifestyle at every turn, while Elsie made snide comments about my outdated belongings. "Don't you ever splurge on anything nice for yourself, Mom?" Damon had asked, eyeing my well-loved armchair with disdain. Before I could respond, Elsie chimed in, "Or maybe she's just too stingy to treat herself." Their words cut deep, reopening old wounds from our past conflicts. I found myself wondering if inviting them into my home had been a terrible mistake. One evening, as I passed by their room, I overheard hushed whispers that made my blood run cold. "Once we've got her worn down, she'll be Putty in our hands," Elsie murmured. Damon's response was muffled, but I caught the gist. They were plotting to take over my house, to manipulate me into handing over the only thing I had left in this world. Tears stung my eyes as I retreated to my bedroom, the weight of their betrayal settling heavily on my shoulders. These weren't the actions of a son seeking refuge. This was a calculated ploy, and I was the target. As I lay awake that night, steeling my resolve, I vowed to fight back against their deceit. If Damon and Elsie thought they could waltz back into my life and strip me of everything, they had another thing coming. The battle lines were drawn, and I would do whatever it took to protect what was rightfully mine, even if it meant going to war with my own flesh and blood. In the days that followed, Damon and Elsie's true colors began to show. Their disdain for my modest lifestyle grew more apparent with each passing day, and the once hushed whispers gave way to blatant disrespect. "This house is a dump," Damon scoffed one morning as I prepared breakfast. "How can you stand living like this, Mom?" Elsie chimed in, her perfectly glossed lips curling into a sneer. "Yeah, it's like you're stuck in the past or something." I bit my tongue, refusing to take the bait, but their words stung nonetheless, reigniting old feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. As the weeks wore on, the tension in the house became palpable. Elsie would constantly undermine my authority, questioning my decisions, and making snide remarks about my parenting skills. "Is that really how you're going to handle this, Arlene?" she'd say, her tone dripping with condescension. No wonder Damon left all those years ago. Damon, meanwhile, seemed content to let Elsie do the heavy lifting when it came to needling me. He'd lounge around the house, criticizing my every move while contributing nothing but his endless sense of entitlement. "Mom, can't you do something about this mess?" He'd whine, gesturing to the perfectly tidy living room. I tried to reason with them, to remind them that this was my home, and they were guests, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. "You should be grateful we're even willing to stay in this dump," Damon spat during one heated argument. "If it were up to me, we'd be out of here in a heartbeat." Elsie nodded in agreement, her eyes narrowed and cold. "Yeah, Arlene, you should count your blessings." Their words cut deep, reopening old wounds and stirring up long-buried resentments. I found myself questioning my decisions, wondering if I'd made a mistake by letting them back into my life. But then I'd catch glimpses of their true nature, the casual cruelty, the complete lack of empathy, and my resolve would harden once more. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I overheard them whispering in the next room. "Once we've worn her down enough, she'll be Putty in our hands," Elsie murmured. "Then we can really start taking what's ours." Damon's response was a quiet chuckle, sending a chill down my spine. In that moment, I knew without a doubt that their intentions were sinister. They weren't just ungrateful house guests. They were actively plotting to take everything I had away from me. As I lay awake that night, anger and determination coursed through my veins. I wouldn't let them win. This was my home, my life, and I'd be damned if I let a couple of manipulative leeches bleed me dry. From that moment on, I vowed to fight back against their machinations with every fiber of my being. If they thought they could waltz in and take what was rightfully mine, they had another thing coming. The battle lines were drawn, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to protect myself, even if it meant going to war with my own flesh and blood. After overhearing Damon and Elsie's sinister plot to manipulate me into handing over my home, I knew I had to take action. I couldn't let them blindside me and strip me of everything I'd worked so hard for. The next day, as they lounged around the living room, I feigned a trip to the store. Instead, I hid in the hallway, straining to hear their hushed whispers. "Once we've got her eating out of our hands, we can start really taking what's ours," Elsie murmured, her voice laced with malice. Damon chuckled darkly. "Yeah, this place will be a gold mine once we've got the old lady out of the picture." My heart sank as their twisted scheme unfolded before me. They weren't just after my home. They wanted to bleed me dry and leave me with nothing. From that moment on, I became a silent observer in my own house, carefully documenting their every move and conversation. I planted hidden cameras and kept a meticulous journal, determined to gather enough evidence to expose their treachery. The days turned into weeks, and their despicable behavior only escalated. Elsie would intentionally antagonize me, pushing my buttons until I was on the verge of snapping. "Wow, Arlene, you really let this place go to hell, didn't you?" she sneered one day, eyeing a spotless countertop with disdain. Damon would chime in, his words cutting deep. "Yeah, Mom, it's like you've just given up or something." I bit my tongue, reminding myself that every jab, every insult, was just another piece of evidence in my growing arsenal. Then, one fateful afternoon, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. I was in the kitchen when I heard a commotion coming from my bedroom. Creeping down the hallway, I peered through the crack in the door to see Damon rifling through my nightstand, stuffing wads of cash into his pockets. "What are you doing?" I demanded, bursting into the room. Damon whirled around, his eyes wide with panic. For a moment, he froze, caught red-handed. Then his expression hardened. "It's not what it looks like, Mom." But it was too late. I'd seen everything. In that moment, the floodgates burst open. All the pent-up anger and resentment came pouring out, fueled by the knowledge that my own son had betrayed me in the most despicable way imaginable. "Don't you dare try to lie to me, Damon," I shouted, jabbing a finger in his direction. "I know all about your little scheme with Elsie. You really think I'm that naive?" Damon's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He knew he'd been caught. "Get out," I spat, my voice trembling with rage. "Both of you, get out of my house and don't even think about coming back." As they scrambled to gather their belongings, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me. They had underestimated me, thinking I was just a feeble old woman they could take advantage of. But I was done being a victim. From now on, the gloves were off, and if they dared to cross me again, they would face the full force of my wrath. After kicking Damon and Elsie out, I thought the worst was behind me. Boy, was I wrong. Those two vipers weren't done sinking their fangs into me just yet. A few days later, I went to withdraw some cash from my savings account, only to find the balance alarmingly low. At first, I chalked it up to a banking error or a momentary lapse in my memory. But as I dug deeper, a sickening realization started to dawn on me. Damon had cleaned me out. That weasel must have gotten his grubby hands on my account information and drained my life savings while he was still living under my roof. The pieces all started falling into place, his constant snooping around my room, the furtive whispers with Elsie late at night. White-hot anger coursed through my veins. I should have known better than to trust that snake, even for a second. He had played me for a fool, preying on my misguided maternal instincts to pull off the ultimate betrayal. I didn't waste any time. The moment the bank opened the next morning, I stormed in and demanded to speak with the manager. After laying out the evidence, they promised to investigate and get to the bottom of the theft. Emboldened, I decided to confront Damon directly. If he thought he could just waltz back into my life, bleed me dry, and disappear without consequences, he had another thing coming. I showed up unannounced at the seedy motel where he and Elsie were holed up, pounding on their door with my fists. "Open up, Damon!" I shouted, not caring who heard. "I know what you did, you lying snake!" The door flew open, revealing Elsie in a ratty bathrobe, her makeup smeared and her eyes glassy. "What's your problem, old lady?" she slurred, clearly hungover or worse. I shouldered past her, zeroing in on Damon lounging on the bed, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "My problem?" I spat, getting right in his face. "My problem is that you stole from me, you ungrateful little worm." For a moment, Damon had the audacity to play dumb. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mom." But then, in a slip of the tongue that would prove to be his undoing, he let a crucial detail slip. "Look, I didn't take that much from your savings, okay? Just enough to get us back on our feet." My jaw dropped. I hadn't mentioned my savings account, only that money had gone missing. He had just confessed to the whole sordid crime without even realizing it. "You lying sack of shit!" I roared, poking him in the chest with my finger. "You really thought you could pull one over on your own mother?" In that moment, any semblance of remorse or familial loyalty vanished from Damon's eyes. He sneered at me, his true colors finally revealed in all their ugly glory. "You know what, Mom? Maybe I did take your money, so what? You owed me after the way you treated me growing up." I recoiled in disgust, barely recognizing the twisted shell of a human being in front of me. "Don't you dare try to play the victim card with me, Damon," I seethed. "You're nothing but a pathetic little grifter, just like your father." With that, I turned on my heel and stormed out, my mind already whirring with plans for revenge. If Damon thought he could get away with robbing me blind, he had hugely underestimated the fury of a mother scorned. The legal system would be my weapon of choice, and by the time I was done, he would be begging for mercy he wouldn't receive. After my confrontation with Damon, I knew I needed reinforcements in my battle against those two snakes. As much as it pained me, there was only one person I could turn to for help, my estranged daughter, Lydia. We hadn't spoken in years, not since our last blow-up over Damon's antics, if I'm being honest. Lydia had always been the practical one, the voice of reason, trying to steer her wayward brother onto the straight and narrow, but Damon wouldn't listen, and eventually the constant fighting drove a wedge between Lydia and the rest of the family. Still, desperate times called for desperate measures. I tracked down Lydia's number and steeled myself for what was sure to be an awkward conversation. "Hello." She sounded guarded, suspicious. Couldn't blame her, really. "Lydia, it's Mom." There was a long pause, and for a moment I thought she might just hang up on me. "Mom, what's going on? Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. "No, honey. Everything is not okay. It's your brother, Damon." Just saying his name aloud unleashed a torrent of emotions I thought I had buried long ago. I proceeded to lay it all out for her. Damon's sudden reappearance, his scheming with that viper Elsie, the stolen money, every last betrayal. To her credit, Lydia didn't interrupt. She just listened patiently as I unloaded years' worth of pent-up anger and hurt. When I finally finished, there was another long silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she said at last, her voice thick with emotion. "I had no idea things had gotten that bad with Damon." Relief washed over me. She believed me. That was half the battle right there. "Will you help me, Lydia?" I pleaded. "I don't know what else to do. He's taken everything from me." Without missing a beat, she replied, "Of course, Mom. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." Over the next few days, Lydia and I formed a battle plan. As it turned out, my timely decision to gather evidence against Damon and Elsie's schemes would prove invaluable. Lydia, now a hotshot lawyer downtown, assured me we had more than enough to take them to court. With the recordings and financial records, we can nail them for fraud, theft, you name it, she said grimly as we pored over the files. I nodded, a familiar fire igniting in my belly. For too long I had allowed Damon to walk all over me, to disrespect me, and siphon away my hard-earned savings. No more. "We're going to bleed those two vultures dry, I growled, slamming my fist on the table for emphasis. Everything they've taken from me I want back tenfold. A hint of a smile played across Lydia's lips. Don't worry, Mom. By the time I'm done with them in court, they'll be lucky if they can afford to split a cardboard box under a bridge. With that, we shook on it. A pact sealed in the fires of righteous vengeance. Damon and Elsie had awoken a sleeping giant, and now they would face the full, furious wrath of a mother betrayed. I could hardly wait to see the looks on their smug faces when they realized the tables had finally turned. The day of reckoning finally arrived. Lydia had done her homework, building an airtight case against Damon and Elsie that left no room for doubt or trickery. As we made our way through the courthouse corridors, I could feel the weight of years' worth of anger and betrayal fueling my every step. When we entered the courtroom, my eyes immediately found Damon and Elsie seated at the defendant's table. Despite their rumpled, haggard appearance, they still managed to shoot me matching sneers of defiance. Elsie even had the audacity to mouth something foul in my direction. I simply stared back at them, unmoved. Their intimidation tactics held no sway over me anymore. Not after everything they'd put me through. The proceedings kicked off, with Lydia wasting no time in laying out the damning evidence against the two grifters. Bank statements, audio recordings, you name it, she had assembled a meticulous paper trail that left no doubts as to their guilt. With each new exhibit unveiled, I could see the smug expressions slowly draining from Damon and Elsie's faces, replaced by naked panic. They had clearly underestimated my daughter's skills as a litigator. When it was my turn to take the stand, I didn't hold back. Staring my son dead in the eye, I recounted in excruciating detail the hell he and his vile accomplice had put me through over these past few months. The lies, the manipulation, the blatant theft. I left nothing out, letting the truth pour forth like a dam bursting. With each new revelation of their despicable actions, Damon seemed to shrink further and further into his chair. Finally, when I was done, there was dead silence in the courtroom. Even the judge looked shaken by the depravity I had laid bare. Damon's lawyer, a greasy bottom feeder if ever there was one, rose to launch a feeble defense. But Lydia was ready, her rapier wit eviscerating every flimsy argument and objection he could muster. In the end, the proceedings were almost anticlimactic. The evidence was so overwhelming, the judge had no choice but to rule entirely in our favor. I'll never forget the looks on Damon and Elsie's faces as the verdict was read. Shock, outrage, fear, it was all there, plain as day. Two conniving snakes who had finally gotten their just deserts. As we left the courthouse, Lydia pulled me aside with a proud grin. "You did it, Mom. We showed those two what happens when you try to mess with this family." I nodded, finally allowing myself to feel the immense weight lifting from my shoulders. Yes, we did. Justice was served. Over the next few weeks, the legal ramifications for Damon and Elsie's misdeeds kept piling up. Fines, frozen assets, even potential jail time on the table. But oddly enough, as gratifying as watching them squirm was, it didn't bring me the sense of complete satisfaction I thought it would. No, that came later, when Lydia and I were cleaning out my home office and came across an old family photo. One of the few remaining snapshots of us all together, as a happy family, before everything went so wrong. Hard to believe that's the same Damon who just tried to take everything from you, huh? Lydia mused, her tone tinged with sadness. In that moment, I realized that as much as Damon's betrayal had cut me deeply, a part of me would always grieve for the sweet little boy he once was, the one who used to cling to my leg and call me Mommy. Turning away to dab at my eyes, I made a silent vow to find peace, to resist letting the anger and bitterness consume me any longer. Damon had made his choices, and now he would have to live with the consequences. As for me, I had a second chance, a chance to rebuild and move forward, free from the toxicity he had brought into my life. With Lydia by my side, I knew I had the strength to do just that. Just when I thought Damon and Elsie had been knocked down a peg, fate decided to deliver one final, brutal kick while they were down. About a week after the court verdict, Lydia came banging on my door, eyes wild and lips twisted in self-satisfied smirk. "Mom, you're not going to believe this," she said without preamble, sweeping past me into the living room. I barely had time to blink before she shoved a manila envelope into my hands. "Take a look." Perplexed, I flipped open the file and began rifling through the documents inside. At first, the legal jargon and financial records didn't make much sense, but then a few key phrases started leaping off the page at me. Engaged in fraudulent business practices, cooking the books, money laundering. My jaw dropped as the full weight of what I was reading sank in. Damon, it seemed, had been up to far more shady dealings than just trying to swindle his own mother. This is unbelievable, I stammered, gripping the damning papers with white knuckles. Where did you get these? Lydia grinned, radiating the cocky self-assurance that made her such a shark in the courtroom. Well, after we hit Damon with that fraud lawsuit, I kept digging, she explained with relish. Turns out he's been running all kinds of scams and shady business deals for years. My head was spinning, but Lydia plowed ahead, laying out the full scope of Damon's tangled web of deceit and illegality. Offshore bank accounts, falsified tax returns, you name it, my son had been up to his eyeballs in more criminality than I could have ever imagined. The best part? Lydia's grin widened, her eyes glinting with triumph. These records are ironclad. No way Damon can wriggle out of it this time. I sank onto the couch, the fight draining from me as the weight of my son's depravity threatened to crush me. How could he have fallen so far? What kind of twisted path had led him to such moral bankruptcy? As if reading my mind, Lydia's expression softened. I know this is a lot, Mom. Believe me, it wasn't easy for me to accept that my own brother is, well, a complete scumbag. She reached out, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. But look on the bright side. With this new evidence, we can bury Damon and that viper Elsie for good, make sure they can never slither back into our lives again. I forced myself to nod, to push aside the tangled mess of emotions swirling inside me. Lydia was right. No matter how deep Damon's betrayal cut, dwelling on the past would only give him more power over me, over us. Instead, I focused on the future, a future free from Damon's toxic influence, his never-ending cycle of lies and manipulation. A future of peace, of being able to rebuild what he had so callously tried to strip away. You're right, I said at last, the ghost of a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. It's time we showed those two exactly what karma has in store. This time, there would be no courtroom theatrics or legal loopholes to exploit. Damon's own hubris and greed had sealed his fate, and I would be lying if I said I didn't look forward to watching him reap what he'd sown. As Lydia grinned back at me, I felt a surge of gratitude for having her in my corner, fighting this battle alongside me. With her relentless tenacity and my newfound resolve, we would emerge victorious. Damon thought he could break me, could grind me down until I had nothing left to give. But he was wrong. This fight was far from over, and next time, I would be the one dictating the terms of his surrender. The day Damon and Elsie finally slithered out of our lives for good was one I'll never forget. After the bombshell revelations about Damon's far-reaching criminal activities, the authorities wasted no time in cracking down. Within days, their assets were frozen, their homes and businesses raided by federal agents. As I watched the mugshots of my disgraced son being paraded across the evening news, a complicated tangle of emotions swirled within me. A part of me felt vindicated, relieved that this poisonous chapter was finally closing. But there was also an undeniable sadness, a grief for the sweet little boy Damon had once been, before greed and moral decay set in. Lydia, ever the pragmatist, had no such mixed feelings. Good riddance to bad rubbish, she declared as we witnessed the dramatic arrest footage. He brought this on himself. I could only nod mutely, too emotionally drained in that moment to articulate the depth of my feelings. In the days and weeks that followed, the legal fallout from Damon's misdeeds continued to mount. Prosecutors were determined to make an example of him, throwing every charge they could at the proverbial wall to see what would stick. Through it all, Lydia was my rock, shepherding me through the dizzying legal quagmire with her typical bulldog tenacity. Seeing her in her element, carving through the legalese and courtroom theatrics like a hot knife through butter, filled me with an immense sense of pride. This was the Lydia I remembered from her childhood, whip-smart, fiercely principled, and possessed of an unshakable moral compass. Watching her now, I felt a pang of regret for all the years of estrangement that had separated us, a chasm of resentment largely driven by my inability to control her wayward brother. As the dust gradually settled and Damon's imprint on our lives faded, I found myself reevaluating my priorities. So much of my existence had revolved around that black hole of a human being, jumping through hoops in a futile attempt to rein in his toxic, self-destructive impulses. No more. From now on, I vowed to fill that void with the people and pursuits that actually mattered, reconnecting with dear friends, picking up hobbies that had fallen by the wayside, simply appreciating the blessings in my life that had too often been overshadowed. Most importantly, I committed myself to repairing the bond with my daughter, to making up for all those lost years. In the aftermath of Damon's betrayal, Lydia had been my guardian angel, fighting tooth and nail to protect what was rightfully mine. I would be forever grateful. We started small at first, weekly lunch dates, the occasional movie night. But gradually something shifted between us, the froideur melting away to reveal the closeness of our old mother-daughter bond. Just having her in my life again, her warmth and vitality and laughter, was like a salve on the deep, aching wound Damon had left behind. Finally, I was able to breathe again, to feel light and hopeful in a way I hadn't in years. One evening, over glasses of wine, Lydia reached across the table to grasp my hand. Her eyes were uncharacteristically misty as she spoke. "I'm so sorry you had to go through all that hell with Damon, Mom. You didn't deserve any of it." I gave her fingers a squeeze, a lump forming in my own throat. "It's okay, honey. We got through it, together." And in that moment, staring into my daughter's eyes, I knew those words rang truer than she could ever realize. Against all odds, Damon's venomous campaign to tear our family apart had achieved the exact opposite. His actions had opened my eyes to what really mattered and brought Lydia and I closer than ever before. For that alone, as painful as the journey had been, I would be forever grateful. The evening air felt heavier as I pushed open the door to our modest living room, the familiar scent of home now laced with the tension of the unknown. "Dean?" My voice, steadier than I felt, cut through the silence. No answer. The house seemed to hold its breath as I moved towards the kitchen, the heart of our daily life, now the stage for a revelation that would shatter everything. There, amidst the scattered evidence of a hastily abandoned meal, stood Dean, his back to me, frozen mid-motion. Beside him, Alara, my once trusted friend, her face a poorly masked tableau of guilt and defiance. The scene before me, stark and unambiguous, rendered words unnecessary, yet I found myself demanding, how long? Dean's turn was slow, his usual confidence replaced by a look I couldn't decipher. "Cadence, he started, but the weakness in his voice only fueled my growing storm. Alara spoke next, her tone brazen. "Why act so surprised, Cadence? You must have seen this coming." Her words, sharp and reckless, aimed to wound. The pain of betrayal, deep and acute, threatened to overwhelm me, but I stood my ground. "You were my friend, Alara, and you," I turned to Dean, "you took vows. Our son, our family, do they mean nothing to you?" Dean's attempt at justification fell flat, his excuses sounding hollow even to his own ears. "It's not what you think, Cadence. We just found comfort in each other," I finished for him, my voice cold, my heart colder. "And you thought I wouldn't find out? Thought I'd just accept this?" The confrontation, charged with betrayal and hurt, laid bare the fissures in our lives. Dean, struggling to articulate his rationale, and Alara, defiant in her role as the other woman, represented everything I had to fight against. This was not just a personal betrayal. It was a war on the life we had built, on the promises made in the presence of love and trust. As I stood there, facing the two people who had jointly dismantled my trust, my resolve hardened. This was not the end of my story, but the beginning of my fight. For my dignity, for my son, for the life I deserved beyond the shadows of deceit. "I want you out," I said finally, my voice steady, my decision irrevocable. "Both of you, tonight." Dean's protest was weak, Alara's silence a confirmation of her guilt. As they gathered their things, the weight of the moment settled on me. This was not just a confrontation. It was the first step towards reclaiming my life, towards a future where I no longer played the part of the unsuspecting victim. The door closed behind them with a finality that echoed through the empty house. Alone, yet unbroken, I knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something powerful within me. A determination to rise from the ashes of this betrayal, to forge a new path on my terms. And so, amid the ruins of my fractured life, I began to plan. for justice, for revenge, for a new beginning. The journey ahead would be long, but I was ready. The morning after Dean and Alara's departure, the house felt eerily silent, a void filled with echoes of the confrontation. The silence, however, was a canvas for my determination, a stark reminder of the betrayal and the need for action. I started the day with a purpose, reaching out to Lara, an old friend, and the one person I knew who could help me navigate the legal intricacies of what lay ahead. "Lara, it's Cadence. I need your advice. Legal advice." Her response was immediate, a testament to our enduring friendship. "I'll be there in an hour. We'll figure this out together." As I waited, I couldn't help but replay last night's events, not with sadness, but with a growing sense of empowerment. By the time Lara arrived, I was ready, armed with the facts and fueled by a resolve to seek justice. Lara's expertise was invaluable. "First, we secure your financial stability and custody of your son. Then, we address the betrayal. Dean and Alara cannot just walk away from this unscathed." Her plan was meticulous, a blend of legal strategy and personal vindication. "We'll start by freezing the joint accounts and filing for sole custody. As for Alara, it's time she learns actions have consequences." The strategy session turned into action quickly. Lara's connections expedited the legal proceedings, and within days, Dean found himself confronted with the reality of his choices. "You can't do this, Cadence. You're destroying everything." His voice, once confident, now pleaded over the phone. "This is the bed you made, Dean. Now you lie in it," I responded, my voice void of the affection that once colored our conversations. Alara's reaction was of similar disbelief, her previous arrogance replaced with panic. "Cadence, please, let's talk about this. We can find a way to make things right. There's nothing left to discuss. You both made your choices, and now you face the consequences," I replied, the finality in my voice mirroring the closure I sought. With Lara's help, the legal battles were swift, leaving Dean and Alara reeling from their losses. But revenge was not solely about legal victories. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about showing that betrayal of trust comes at a price. The community's reaction only added to their downfall. Friends and neighbors, once mutual confidants, sided with me, their disdain for Dean and Alara's actions evident in their support and the isolation that followed for the two of them. As the dust settled on the legal confrontations, a new sense of peace began to take root within me. The betrayal that once threatened to define my existence now served as a catalyst for my transformation. I was no longer the victim, but the architect of my destiny, a woman reborn from the ashes of deceit. With the legal battles behind me, the victory felt hollow. The community's support, while comforting, couldn't fill the void left by Dean's betrayal. It was time to rebuild, to focus on my son and the future we deserved. Yet, the shadow of vengeance lingered, a reminder that justice served did not equate to wounds healed. My resolve was tested when I encountered Dean at a mutual friend's gathering. His presence, once familiar and comforting, now sparked a tumult of emotions. "Cadence," he began, his voice tinged with regret. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." The sincerity in his eyes tempted me to believe, to forgive. But the scars of betrayal ran deep. "Sorry doesn't change what happened, Dean. You chose this path, not me," I replied, my words laced with the pain and strength forged from the ordeal. The encounter with Dean was a turning point, a realization that while legal revenge had been exacted, emotional closure was elusive. It was a lesson in the complexity of forgiveness, in the distinction between justice served and peace attained. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work and into being a mother. My son, innocent, in the wake of our shattered family, became my anchor, his laughter a balm for my soul. Through him I saw the possibility of a future unmarred by the past, a life rebuilt on the foundation of resilience and love. Yet, the journey of healing was not without its challenges. Alara, undeterred by her fall from grace, sought redemption in the eyes of those who had turned their backs. "Cadence, can we talk?" her message read, a plea for understanding, if not forgiveness. The decision to meet her was not easy. Face to face, the woman who had been my friend, then my betrayer, now sought my mercy. "I was wrong," she admitted, her eyes reflecting the weight of her choices. "I've lost everything, but I've learned. I'm truly sorry." The words I had longed to hear, yet their arrival brought no satisfaction. Forgiveness was a journey, not a destination, a path I was still navigating. I appreciate your apology, Alara, but I can't undo the past, and I can't erase the pain. Maybe in time we'll both find peace. The days turned into weeks, each one a step further from the past and closer to a future I was still shaping. My world, once defined by the actions of others, now took form around the choices I made for myself and for my son. The legal victories and public vindication had faded into the background, replaced by the quieter, more challenging work of rebuilding from within. My journey was interrupted by an unexpected encounter with Dean at a community event. This time, his approach was hesitant, respectful of the distance I had put between us. "Cadence, I've been doing a lot of thinking," he started, his voice carrying a sincerity I hadn't heard before. "I know I can't change the past, but I'm here, trying to be a better person for our son." The mention of our child, the innocent caught in the crossfire of our decisions, softened the hard edges of my resolve. "He deserves the best of both of us," I admitted, the shared love for our son a bridge over the chasm of our past. This acknowledgement marked a shift, a door opening to the possibility of co-parenting with grace, if not friendship. The dialogue between us, once charged with anger and accusation, now treaded the delicate terrain of cooperation and mutual respect for the sake of the child who needed us both. In this new chapter, the antagonist of my story was no longer Dean or Alara, but the bitterness that threatened to poison my future. The realization that forgiveness was not a gift to those who wronged me, but a liberation for myself, began to take root. The process was neither easy nor immediate. There were days when the hurt resurfaced, a reminder of the scars that would never fully disappear. Yet, with each passing day, the choice to forgive, to release the hold of past grievances, became a little easier, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Amidst this personal evolution, a surprising ally emerged in Lara. Her unwavering support had been my anchor through the storm, and now she offered wisdom on the journey of forgiveness. "Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die," she reminded me one afternoon. "Forgiveness is for you, Cadence. It's the path to peace." Her words echoed in my heart, a mantra for the days when the weight of the past felt too heavy. And so I leaned into the discomfort, embracing the complex, often messy process of healing and forgiveness. The landscape of my life, once marred by betrayal and hurt, was slowly reshaping into something new, something hopeful. The process of forgiveness had led me down a path of unexpected growth, teaching me that even in the wake of devastation there can be renewal. In this new chapter, I found myself taking steps towards a future I had once thought impossible. My days were filled with the laughter of my son, the support of friends, and the satisfaction of personal achievements. The shadow of Dean and Ilara's betrayal had not disappeared, but had faded into the background, a part of my past that no longer defined me. An opportunity for a fresh start presented itself in the form of a new job, one that promised not just financial stability, but a chance to pursue my passions. "This is your moment, Cadence," Lara encouraged me the day I received the offer. "You've earned this." The decision to accept was easy, propelled by the desire to provide for my son and to prove to myself that I could rise above the challenges that had once threatened to consume me. "We're going to make a great life, just you and me," I whispered to my son, his small hand in mine, a symbol of our unbreakable bond. But life, as it often does, had more lessons in store for me. Dean's attempt to re-enter our lives, not as a partner but as a father seeking redemption, tested the boundaries of forgiveness I had worked so hard to establish. "I don't want to disrupt your lives, I just want to be a part of his," Dean said during one of our cautious, awkward meetings, gesturing towards our son. The complexity of emotions his request evoked was a reminder of the delicate balance between forgiveness and self-preservation. Yet, watching my son's tentative interactions with Dean, I recognized the value of reconciliation, not for Dean's sake, but for the innocent child who deserved to know his father. This period of adjustment was not without its challenges. There were moments of doubt, of fear that opening this door would invite back the pain I had fought so hard to overcome. But there were also moments of unexpected joy, of witnessing the tentative rebuilding of a relationship between father and son, grounded in cautious hope rather than blind trust. As the seasons changed, so too did the fabric of our lives, weaving a tapestry of resilience, forgiveness, and cautious optimism. The new job had not only brought financial stability, but also a renewed sense of self-worth and purpose. My son thrived in this environment of love and security, his laughter a constant reminder of why every struggle was worth enduring. However, life's narrative is seldom without conflict, and it wasn't long before a new challenge emerged, one that would test the strength of the fragile peace we had built. Alara, having navigated her own journey of loss and self-reflection, sought to re-enter our lives, not as a friend or foe, but as someone seeking closure and possibly redemption. "Cadence, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I need to make amends," she said during an unexpected encounter at a mutual acquaintance's gathering. The emotions her presence stirred were complex, a mixture of old wounds reopening and the recognition of shared human frailty. Her request for forgiveness, while sincere, demanded a level of magnanimity that felt almost insurmountable. Yet, in the spirit of the growth and healing I had committed to, I found myself willing to listen, if not fully ready to absolve. The dialogue between us was hesitant, each word measured, a dance around the pain of the past and the uncertainty of the future. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, Alara, but I'm willing to try to understand," I responded, acknowledging the power of forgiveness to heal not just the recipient, but the giver as well. This encounter, though fraught with emotional landmines, paved the way for a new understanding. Forgiveness, I realized, was not an erasure of the past, but a means of liberating oneself from the chains of bitterness and resentment. In the midst of navigating these personal upheavals, a surprise development at work offered an unexpected opportunity for advancement, a testament to my hard work and dedication. "Cadence, your leadership and innovation have not gone unnoticed. We'd like you to lead the new project," my supervisor announced, recognition that filled me with pride and reaffirmed my belief in my abilities and in the promise of new beginnings. The calm that had settled over my life was deceptive, a brief respite before the next storm. Just as I had begun to navigate the complexities of forgiveness and the challenges of my new role at work, an unexpected development threatened to upend the delicate balance I had achieved. A legal notice arrived without warning, a stark reminder that the past was not as far behind as I had hoped. Dean, motivated by a desire to reassert himself in our son's life, was challenging the custody arrangement. "I just want to be a part of his life, Cadence. I'm not the same man I was," he pleaded over the phone, his words echoing a sentiment I had heard before, yet underpinned by a desperation I hadn't seen in him. The battle lines were drawn once again, not in the courts of law this time, but in the arena of personal conviction and the unresolved tensions that lingered between us. "Our son needs stability, Dean. Your actions have consequences," I responded, the firmness in my voice belying the turmoil within. This new challenge forced me to confront not just Dean, but my own fears and uncertainties about the future. The prospect of revisiting old wounds, of fighting once more for what I believed was right for my son, was daunting. In the midst of this upheaval, Alara reached out, her timing impeccable. "I know we've had our differences, Cadence, but I'm here if you need someone to talk to," she offered, a gesture that, months ago, I would have dismissed outright. Yet, the journey we had both embarked on towards healing and understanding had shifted the dynamics between us. "Thank you, Alara. I appreciate that," I found myself saying, surprised by my own willingness to accept her olive branch. As the days passed, the tension surrounding the custody challenge grew. Meetings with lawyers and mediators became a routine part of my life, each encounter with Dean a test of my resolve and a measure of how far we had both come, and how far we still had to go. The dialogue between us was fraught with the weight of our shared history, each word a testament to the complex web of emotions that bound us. "I'm not trying to take him away from you, Cadence. I just want to be a part of his life," Dean insisted, his plea a mix of sincerity and desperation. The resolution, when it came, was not a victory for one side or the other, but a compromise, a mutual agreement to put our son's needs above our own grievances. "We'll make it work for his sake," I conceded, recognizing the value of co-parenting in a way that provided our son with the love and support of both his parents, even if from a distance.